Ted Lieu sounds like me because I have been saying the president is unwell to be very... Sorry, guys, I just had to nod off for a second. This is insane. It is crazy. It is a national security concern. Like, let's put aside the fact that he was at a very loud game. If the president is falling asleep like this in places and spaces in front of cameras where we can see it, what is happening that we can't see? What are the people at the White House hiding? What are they covering up? They want us to be talking about the Knicks and how they booed the president. The people in the arena booed the president. And I also am wondering why Steve Witkoff was there and not negotiating the end to the war with Iran when apparently the war is not over, more than 100 days in. But this is crazy. It is insane. And if you were at the White House, would you be asking these questions? Why, Mr. President, why are you so tired?
Well, because the question is, we know why he's so tired.
Well, do we? We don't know.
Well, part of it is like he doesn't sleep. The man
Neither does Michael Steele, and he doesn't take a nap, and I've never
Michael
seen
Steele
him.
is many years younger.
Very much so, but I'm just saying, he
very
doesn't nap, and he doesn't drink coffee, really.
I don't know what to say. We're going to skip that.
Okay.
But I think the thing that's really important is this is one of those things that this White House could sell, right? They could say, sometimes the president falls asleep at things, but that's because he's calling reporters at night. That's because he's on the phone all the time. But instead, what they want to sell, they could say that. They're not saying anything now. So that's part of the issue. When you ask them questions about it, they act like we're crazy, like we're not watching it. And there was a time a few weeks ago where they took screenshots of reporters, Caitlin Collins, one of them, to CNN, taking a picture of her where actually was blinking and said, oh, she's falling asleep. They did the same thing with Joy Behar at The View. Took a screenshot when she was on the show, said, oh, she's falling asleep. Because for them, it is a thing to make fun of and joke about. But, Simone, you're right. It is much more serious.
But the difference between taking a screenshot of someone in the middle of a clip where you catch it just right in there, it's not the same as...
No, he was slumped in the Oval Office.
It's not the same of all this activity going on around you and having to watch the process of going to sleep, where your eyes get heavy and you try to stay awake. If someone says something, you do that. But that's that. The Wall Street Journal, I think, kind of puts a point on where all of this sort of goes down the bowl in. The celebratory air that Trump brought to the party has dissipated ever since his cultural cachet hit his zenith around his second inauguration. Trump's setbacks on the culture front come amid a dip in his approval ratings and growing concerns over his handling of the economy. Several high-profile podcasting allies have turned on Trump over the war in Iran and his administration's handling of the Epstein files, among other issues. So the problem of that imagery is it makes it hard to sustain and hold in place all the people that brought you to the dance and kept you on the dance floor. And now they see you falling asleep in the middle of the dance when they still have stuff they want to get done, Epstein files, when they still have, projects and other things that they think should be happening, they get concerned, they pull away. How does that play? What have you been hearing about that tension that the Wall Street Journal kind of puts into this, fading fun? But I think it runs a little bit deeper than that in that universe, because the one thing Donald Trump loves more than anything else, well, two things. One is the lackey, the person who's going to lick the boot and say whatever needs to be said at the right moment. But the other person is the person who actually is going to come to the table and do some of the things that he needs to be done out in the culture. And that piece of it seems to be also a problem.
I mean, what the Wall Street Journal is saying is that Donald Trump has a lack of focus. Right.
He's not that's what it breaks down to.
He's not focusing on the things or the people that brought him to the dance.
Right.
And when you talk to some of his allies, they will say the same thing. Susie Wiles, the White House chief of staff, has been telling staff, you guys focus on the talking points. We're going to talk about affordability and the midterms, and President Trump is going to be President Trump. And I think I've never worked in the White House, Simone. You have. But that seems like a really confusing way to run an operation. Because even if all of the folks
talk about Trump, this, and he's going to talk about that.
I mean, that's not running the operation.
Donald Trump on Friday got a really good jobs number, right? Like there was surprising jobs. Has anybody heard him talk about it other than one tweet that we've seen?
Right. I mean,
he had a rally on Friday, almost no mention of it.
I mean, that to me is we have to acknowledge that he's falling asleep while the economy is off the rails, right? And I think if sort of all indicators were positive across the board, if we were not at war, a war of choice, this might be less alarming, but it is alarming in the context of where we find our economy and our positioning.
I think that I really, and people are going to be like, why are you yelling? I used to work in the White House, okay? I have worked for presidents, I've worked for a vice president, I've worked for governors, I've elected state representatives, I've elected mayors. To be very clear, the president of the United States is, in fact, one of the most powerful people, if not the most powerful person in the world. They, and they alone, make the decisions if we go to war or if the button is pushed or if it's not. They make the decision if our young men and women and our service members are put into harm's way. It is the president of the United States whose words can tank an economy. And this president, the fact that he is sleeping regularly in public, in front of cameras, in the middle of press conferences, in the middle of games, is a national security concern. So if the president is asleep here in places that we can see with our own eyes, okay, or appears to be asleep, right? I guess I wasn't there. I don't know if he was asleep. Appears to be asleep. Then what else is happening in the White House?
So is
he napping? Like, who is in charge?
So to that point, I thought it was notable that at this big UFC thing they're doing at the White House, we have just learned that's going to be closed to reporters unless the UFC lets them in. Given how highly choreographed this has been, given that they have told service members they're allowed to come, but only if they pay their own way, meet a certain way, and because clearly the president wants a very specific aesthetic at this event, why then wouldn't you want a fair and free press there to cover its splendor?
Because this is an organization at the White House, the folks that operate in the White House, that don't want that, right? In theory, Donald Trump does want people to see what he's doing, but he knows that people will, right? He knows that the pool will be there, so the White House press pool will be there.
Will they be there?
They will be there, according to the White House. We will see if that actually happens, but all of the other reporters won't be there, and that means if anything else happens, right, on that day, if anything else happens around the country, if something happens at the White House, then the only reporters that will see it will be the pool. And that is also an issue of national security and concern. And I think the thing for this White House with Donald Trump is everything's choreographed because he wants it to look a certain way, not because he wants the American people to see everything. And I think that is a difference between this White House and many others, and that includes him, possibly falling asleep at the White House, whether he's at games or not. And I think it's a really interesting metaphor for the way that he's operating and the lack of focus that even his allies to this day will tell me and every other reporter that he does not have when it comes to the things that might win them the midterms. What's the bill that they're running on? Still the first bill that they really passed, which is the great, big, beautiful bill last year. They have nothing else to run on.